Hello and welcome to the shop. Many of you know that I have a second YouTube channel. It's called What You Doin' Bob, and it's basically a vlog, a shop vlog behind the scenes of what's going on as I'm working on some of these projects that I'm presenting to you in videos. If you follow me over there, you probably know that recently I purchased an older model Atlas metal lathe. Now I am super excited to have this new addition in my shop, but I gotta let you know, it wasn't perfect when I bought it. It's about an 85 or 90% solid lathe. There's a couple of small problems. One of those problems we're going to address today in this video. This is the main drive pulley, and this pulley is warped. It will wobble when it spins. Now I started off by making a pulley out of some solid hard maple. And the pulley actually worked pretty well for a little while, but even though I epoxied a nut on the side of the pulley, it didn't hold. This just wasn't good enough. A good buddy of mine, Bill Kibbe, contacted me, and he said, "Hey, I got some stuff that you're gonna like. It's called AlumiRes 3," and he said they use it to make the foot and hand holds on rock climbing walls. While we were on the phone talking, he poured me a blank. Take a look at this. That's AlumiRes 3. It's probably about 3 inches tall, way taller than I need. It's a little larger than what I need, which is great. I'll be able to true it up. But tonight, we are going to take this block of AlumiRes 3 and we're going to attempt to turn a new drive pulley. So if you're interested, stick around. I think this will be a fun one. When I made this wooden pulley, I put a tenon on the back and I just used a standard chuck to hold it and turn it. And the last thing I did was drill a hole down the center. Now my wood lathe is not the most accurate machine and there's a little bit of wobble in the tailstock. So when I drilled this hole, I did not hit dead center. So even this pulley had a tiny bit of wobble with it. Several people commented that maybe I should start by drilling a hole in my blank first and turning it based on that hole. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start out by building a mandrel to turn this on. We'll drill our hole down the middle of our blank and then we'll turn the proper shape for our pulley. I'm ready to attempt turning this block of plastic into a pulley for my lathe. I purchased this brass bushing and it fits perfectly onto the spindle of my lathe. So my thought is, if I drill a hole down the center of the blank and epoxy it in, I purchased this 1/2-inch bolt. I can use it as a mandrel. We'll cut the head of the bolt off. We can choke up on this in our collet chuck. Once we put the blank on the bolt, I can use a washer and a couple of nuts to lock it down, and then we should be able to turn it as true as possible. I've drilled a 3/4 inch hole all the way through my blank. What I want to do now is rough up my bushing, and then we'll take a little acetone and we're going to clean the hole in the blank, we're going to clean the bushing, and then I'm going to epoxy it into the blank. We're going to treat this just like we would a pin blank or a pin tube. I'm just going to give it some roughness so that the epoxy has something to really stick to. I'm just using a little bit of Loctite 5-minute epoxy. I've already got equal amounts poured out here on this tape. We just need to mix it up thoroughly, and then we'll get it inside of our blank. Now we're going to take and knock our bushing. And I'm going to get something and force that bushing just a little farther down below the surface so I can clean that edge up. While the epoxy dries on our brass bushing, we now want to turn our attention to cutting the head off of this bolt so we can begin making our mandrel. I've got the blank for my pulley chucked up. I went ahead and using a starter bit, I put a 60-degree dimple in the end of the bolt so that I could use my tailstock. That took probably 95% of the wobble out of it. You are going to see some wobble with the blank. I've got it on about 300 RPMs here. Take a look at that. She moves around pretty good. So I think what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and true it up just enough to where it's not jerking around a whole lot. And then I'm going to flatten this side out as best as I can. We'll flip this over and then we'll start working on cleaning up the other side and turning the pulley. I'm running about 850, 900 RPMs. I'm going to start out really slow just to clean this up, and we'll speed it up as we true. I've got the blank true, and it really took a lot of bounce out of it, which is nice because it's a little easier to control. As you rotate it, it doesn't look like it's true because of the two different colors of resin, but it is nice and true. I just put my calipers to it, and it is still a tiny bit larger in diameter than the pulley. I'm happy about that. We're going to leave that alone until we start turning down because I want that extra meat. That way when I flip it over, if it's a little bit off, you know, after the flip, I can clean that up as well. I'm going to go ahead now and attempt to flatten this face. I've got the outside edge nice and flat. I'm happy with that. We will need to take this little nub off, but we're going to do that over on our belt sander. The blank looks like it's wobbling, but if I lay a tool on there, you can see it is perfectly steady. That's just the difference in the two materials. That it's an optical illusion. But we're going to take this over to the belt sander. I'm going to sand this little nub away, then we're going to flip this over and flatten the other face of this blank. I just got back from the belt sander and I sanded the little nub where the washer was down off the blank, and you can see that I have a perfectly flat surface. Here's the original pulley, and if I center it on the blank, you can see that there's about, I don't know, maybe an 1/8 inch all the way around, so I've still got a little bit of meat on here. Hopefully it rides true. I'm going to put the flat edge against my collet chuck, and we're going to work really hard to clean up the other edge of the blank. Got the blank trued up. It's running pretty darn good. I'm happy with it. Let me give it a little bit of speed here, and we can lay this tool on there. And you can see that there's no bounce whatsoever. It's running nice and true. Now what we want to do is start measuring out our pulley and marking the blank to get ready to start cutting the pulley shape into it. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but I measured the width of the top pulley, and that's this line right here. And then half of that amount is this line here. And I've brought out some calipers and I've measured the diameter of the inside of the pulley. So what I'm going to do is take my parting tool, and on the center line, we're going to go down to this dimension. I just finished with the inside of the top pulley, and as you can see, I've got a nice snug fit. I'm really happy about that. I brought a belt over, and if I take that belt and I lay it inside of the pulley that came with the lathe, you can see there's a little bit of a lip on top for the belt. And if you look down in there, you can see, I don't know how well you can see it, there's a little gap between the belt and the bottom rail. If I lay this belt in my pulley, I've got just a little bit of a lip on top, and if I roll it back, I've got just a little bit of a gap between the bottom of the pulley and the bottom of the belt. So I'm actually very happy with that. I think that's ready to be sanded. I set my calipers to the diameter of the drop-down pulley, and what I'm going to do now is begin turning the outside of this pulley until I get to that perfect dimension. I am just a little larger than my desired diameter, which is okay with me. I'm going to go ahead and take the rest of this plastic away down to this diameter. Then we'll fine tune when the whole thing is clean and we can see it all. We'll fine tune it to the proper diameter, and then we'll start cutting our step down pulley. I've got my blank turned down to just a little larger than the size I need. What I'm going to do is get everything cleaned up, and then we'll fine tune it. Take a look at this black area here. See the black on my hands? That is actually little pockets of pigment. I guess it never cured. And I've got black spots all down my t-shirt where it's throwing it at me. But it's not going to hurt anything. I mean, it'll all run out or finish curing now that it's getting air to it. But let me clean up. We'll get this down to the proper diameter, and then we'll start cutting our second step down pulley. like to thank you for joining me in the shop for this video. I think this pulley is going to work really well. This material, I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of rough, and it grabs the belt really well. So I think this is going to work out great for the time being. I'm excited to have it. The only issue that I had is when I was tapping the bronze fitting inside of this inside of the pulley, my tap handle loosened up, and I went to grab the tap handle to tighten it, and when I did, the tap slipped out of the handle. The pulley fell to the floor, which broke the tap. Not a big deal, I'll get another tap, but took a little chip out of the outside of the pulley. I'm going to use a little sandpaper, rough that up. It doesn't appear to hurt it. It still spins just fine, grips just fine, and I'm really happy with that. This is going to be great for the time being. Eventually, I will replace this with either a stock pulley, or I may, if I can get a piece of aluminum large enough, attempt to turn an aluminum one on this lathe once I get it fully functional. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. Had a great time demoing this for you. I hope you enjoy it. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon, and have a great evening, everybody.